Hi everyone, welcome to our call, our Fun Fit Fabulous call. So it is, I just checked, it's the 6th of February, and today we're going to talk a little bit about fat loss, well, women and fat loss. I'm going to mute you all so there's no interference and kind of feedback thing. Now, first of all, you guys know I'm not a qualified expert by any stretch of the imagination. This is just stuff that I have personally learned as part of my journey, from the reading that I do, from blogs and podcasts that I listen to, and it's kind of a bit of an amalgamation of all of that. So if you've got any questions, by all means, chuck them out there. I might not be able to answer them, but I will give it a go. And if I don't know the answer, I will obviously go and try and see if I can find the answers to your questions. So, yeah, I mean, this is a topic that's obviously quite close to my heart for a number of different reasons. And I thought it would be really useful to kind of share some of this stuff, because I think that as women, we give ourselves quite a hard time, especially after having kids. And kind of I wanted to delve a little bit into some of the reasons why it can be a little bit different for us than it is for men, and some of that sort of stuff. And you're going to have to excuse me, my voice has been trying to disappear all day, so hopefully it will last, and hopefully I don't sound too croaky. So I've got some notes so I don't go off piste too much, because you know me, I love a chatter. So first of all, physiologically, get the words out, we are obviously quite different to men. So we obviously, our bodies are primarily built to reproduce. So, you know, evolution, our bodies are made quite differently, and that is just kind of how we're made. Now, generally speaking, we store more fat than men, and the reason why we store more fat than men in general is because our bodies are evolutionarily made to carry babies. So right from when we hit puberty, our bodies are getting prepared to be the baby carriers. Now, I know that some feminists out there and things like that might not agree with what I'm saying here, but it's physiologically true. Like, that is just how we are made. And, you know, if you look at, for example, when you're carrying a baby, a woman needs about 50,000 calories extra throughout pregnancy. We need those calories to grow the baby. It's not quite eating for two, although that is obviously the notion, but we do need those extra calories to be able to grow that baby. Now, if you think about what men have to do, they don't have to do anything to produce the sperm, right? So, you know, we have to, you know, they don't have to eat more calories to kind of have their reproductive organs going, whereas we really, really do. Now, I'll delve into a little bit about the differences in terms of like PCOS and stuff, because that's a little bit different. But let's go with that general notion first of all. So during pregnancy, we store fat, and we store fat throughout the point until we hit when we go into when we go into menopause. So because our bodies are still potentially in a range where we can carry children. Now, if we change our diets so that we are eating really, really low calories, sometimes, and what often professional athletes will find, or weightlifters, or people that are on really, really restricted diets, is that it stops our periods. Or, you know, that for some people there can also be underlying health problems, right? But normally it's, you know, that's the reason why periods often stop, and that's called amenorrhea. Is that how I would pronounce it? You know what I mean. Anyway, periods stop. So I think one of the things that I always say to people, so I thought that this was going on with me years ago. It wasn't actually that. It was that I had polycystic ovary syndrome. But that is definitely something to keep an eye on. If your cycles go out of till and you are generally regular 28-day cycle, that is really, really a hint that you need to do something with your nutrition. So people often think cutting back calories and doing it that way is the way forward. It absolutely isn't the way forward, because we definitely don't want our bodies to stop having periods. Like, that isn't good for our physiological kind of response, right? So we don't want that to happen. So what our bodies tend to do is that we store more fat until we just stop menstruating. Like, that is just part of what happens. So if we are smaller, then often we might not need as much calories. We're generally smaller than men. My voice is really going. Hold on. So that means we don't burn as many calories as men. We just are smaller, height-wise, width-wise, waist-wise, whatever. So it means that actually it's harder for us to burn calories as well. So if you take a man and a woman, they go into the gym, they do exactly the same workout, regardless of what it is, or you press play on one of your Beachbody workouts, and I do exactly the same workout as Nick. There is no two ways about it that he will burn more calories than me. That is just because how we are made. And it just takes us longer to burn those same amount of calories. So I might have to do an hour in the gym versus Nick, who might only need to do 45 minutes or half an hour. That is just kind of how it is. So that's kind of the first thing to say. So often we compare ourselves with, well, why can men do this and why do we hold on more fat? Well, that's really the true reason. Now, one thing I will add at this point, and you've probably heard me say it a lot before and other people say it, you can't out-train a bad diet. It is unfortunately 80% nutrition. What you fuel your body is how you are. So you can go for 3 hours in the gym, right? But if you eat crap, then it's not gonna move you towards your goals. So that's one thing to think about. More water. Hold on. It's getting really croaky. So anyway, one of the things that our bodies tend to do in different parts of our menstrual cycle, and one of the reasons why it's actually real, and it's a real shame, I really wanted Laura to be on this call actually, in terms of when we weigh ourselves, what that means, and during our cycles, because that's really important. As we go through our cycles, different things happen throughout that. So let's just pretend that someone has a 28-day cycle. They start their period on the 1st of February. Now, during that first 2 weeks before we ovulate, our bodies are very different than when we are ovulating, and then they are again very different like the week before we have our period. Now, around ovulation time, and I find this really, really interesting, is that basically our bodies create more leptin. And what leptin is it's the hunger hormone, which you might have heard me talk about before. So it makes us feel more hungry. But the reason why that happens, so it happens right after ovulation, is because it's stopping us from getting too lean at that point, because our bodies are ready to get pregnant. So if you go back to thinking about having to have the calories and have the fat to reproduce a baby and reproduce and then become pregnant, that is kind of part of this, which I find quite fascinating. So in men, they don't tend to have as much leptin as us, so they don't get as hungry. Often we get to day 10 on our diet or whatever, and our leptin levels might be going through the roof. It also might coincide with where you are in your cycle. So that's really important to think about. Now, in terms of, and some of you might have heard this before, is BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate. Now, gosh, this throat is doing my head in. Essentially, basal metabolic rate is the rate that if you weren't to get out of bed, it's how many calories your body would burn. It's not to say that if you stayed in bed, your body wouldn't burn more than that. But generally speaking, that's kind of like the base level. Now, men's is higher than ours, which is completely normal. There's then two other rates, which is called NEAT and MEAT. So NEAT is basically what you do throughout the day. So it's walking to the car, it's walking up the stairs, it's all of that sort of stuff. And that's what we do throughout the day. And MEAT is essentially what you do in your workouts. And that's the kind of the additional calories that you burn on top. So there's kind of three groups that you have to think about when you're thinking about how your body responds and how your body burns calories throughout the day. Now, if you're in a large enough deficit in terms of your calorie intake, then your body, how do I explain this to make sense? It basically, your body has a way of trying to conserve energy. So it will mean if you stay in bed all day, you don't obviously need to eat as many calories because your body's conserving the calories, if that makes sense, while you're sat in bed. Now, what often happens is if people are very active throughout the day, they do a lot of walking, they walk up, they walk up the stairs, and then they add in their workout and they keep their calories really low, what that means is that we end up getting very tired, we're very lethargic. We then crave more foods because our bodies are in that deficit and they don't know what to do with it. So we then often reach for things, and often it's things that are carbs. Now, it's because carbs give us energy, right? So that would make sense why we want to crave those types of foods. Now, often what we find is if you eat in a calorie deficit, you might be going hammer and tong during your workout. Although what you will find is that you will be less likely to do all of the other stuff. You think like, oh, well, I've just done a really hard hour's worth of cardio or whatever you've done. So you then tend to move less in your NEAT calorie allowance. So for me, that makes perfect sense. If I don't eat enough and then I do a really, really hard workout, I'm exhausted and I'm like, I probably sit at my desk more. I don't get up and move around. I can feel that I'm much lower in mood. So it's really about kind of trying to achieve that balance. Now, so if you neglect the part of where you're just generally moving on a day-to-day basis, then you're not going to burn the calories. So it's why it's really important to not have too much of a calorie deficit. So the thing to definitely consider is upping our protein, because that gives us kind of that slow burning energy. But what we seem to find is that when we then lift weights, when you then eat a bit more protein, you will then see changes, both in terms of the strength gains that we get because you're fueling your muscles with more of that energy, but also throughout the day. So that's really important. So that's why, when we're looking at our containers and things like that, we always talk about trying to have protein at every meal, because it gives us that sustained energy, which then enables us to deal with life's daily routines, but also helps with our workouts as well. So, make sense? Cool. Now, something I want to talk about is testosterone. And a lot of you will know, I've spoken about this a little bit in the past, as women, there is zero chance, unless you are using anabolic steroids, that we are going to get really big and bulky like the men. It is physically impossible for that to happen with us because we just don't have the testosterone levels that men have. Now, we do, however, release testosterone. At some points, we release our testosterone levels are higher at some points during pregnancy, during our cycle than others. And roughly, that's about the day before ovulation. So we might go into, do our lifting, and we might be getting higher weights, more reps, and we feel really strong. We feel more confident. And usually it's because we're around that day of when we're ovulating. And another thing is that's often when we're most horny, which makes perfect sense. Our bodies are prepped and ready to go to get pregnant. So obviously we want men, right? So yeah, so that's when the testosterone is at its highest throughout our cycle. And that is when we're most likely to see strength gains and things like that. So sometimes the reason why I think this is important is that sometimes we beat ourselves up a little bit about, well, I lifted that last week, why am I finding it so difficult this week? Or I was able to go hammer and leather in my work in this exact same workout last week, why can't I do it this week? Again, it's connected to your cycle and where you are in your cycle. So it's definitely really, really important to know where you are and to track that, in terms of your strength, in terms of your hunger levels, in terms of what's going on, because it's going to tell you lots and lots of information to be able to become a bit of a master of your own journey, I guess, and to not beat yourself up when you don't lift as much as you did the week before. And I think for me, that's something that I've learned is, right, okay, so that's why this is happening. And my periods are still all over the place because I've got PCOS, but generally speaking, I can just about track where I am in it. So now estrogen gets a massively bad rap. And in the first 2 weeks of our cycles, that is when estrogen is most dominant. And it's proestrogen that's most dominant in the second 2 weeks. Now, proestrogen is connected often with the leptin levels raising in our body. So in those last 2 weeks before you come on your period, that is when the proestrogen is being released. That is when the leptin levels are raised, which is why then we feel more hungry. So that's also really important to pick up in where you are in your cycle, because you can then be thinking like, right, okay, where am I in my cycle? Why am I so frigging hungry this week? I had that the first week of of T20. And now that makes perfect sense. I thought it was the workouts. It wasn't the workouts. It's where I was in my cycle. So really, really interesting to know. Now, week 4, so the 4th week, so just before we start our period, we will often find, and it's PMS, right? Now, if you don't have PMS, then you are so freaking lucky. Jump from the rooftops about those types of things, because PMS is related so much to, low mood. We can struggle to lift. Now that can be really demoralizing, right? So again, going back to, well, why could I lift that last week and I can't lift it this week? The other thing is that because of the proestrogen levels, it actually makes us more prone to injury. Hold on, water break. So it makes us more prone to injury. I'm really, really clumsy. I walk into things a lot. I get covered in bruises. It's a pain in the ass, and I'm generally in a bit of a bad mood. That's completely normal. But the thing to think about in those last 2 weeks is that actually we have those raised leptin levels, and I'm not saying that you should not eat for what your body wants, because actually if you don't eat, it's going to make you more grouchy, it's going to make you more tired, it's going to make you more lethargic, it's going to worsen your mood. So in those 2 weeks, though, your body doesn't need a shitload more calories. So you don't need to go out and eat like burger and chips because you're in that part of your cycle, right? Generally speaking, our bodies only probably need about 100 to 300 calories more per day in those periods when those leptin levels are raised. So 100 to 300 calories, an apple is about 100 calories. So we don't have to go out and eat shed loads more. But what we might want to do is add a bit more fruit into our diet, or add small things, 1 handful of nuts or whatever. 100 to 300 calories is really all our body needs on that kind of additional thing. So what I guess I'm trying to say is you want to just be mindful of where you are in your cycle to what your weight is doing. I know that if I weigh myself one week to the next, and I am definitely always heavier in the second part of my cycle. That just tends to be what happens, and most women do find that. So it's just worth thinking about where you are and kind of comparing. One of the things that I really like the idea of is comparing your strength gains, your weight, your measurements. You're better off doing that in the same weeks. So it would seem crazy to look at my weight on the first day of my menstrual cycle and day 21, so 3 weeks later, and think like, well, I've put on weight, what's going on? Or my measurements haven't changed. What you want to be doing is comparing day 1 of your cycle to day 1 of the following month of your cycle. That is a much better estimate and a much better, that's much better information, because it's much more tailored to what is going on with your body. And now, this is why, there's that kind of trail of thought of don't weigh yourself more than once a week or once a month or whatever. So I kind of get that. I like to, obviously I'm doing 2B mindset, I weigh myself daily. There's other reasons why I personally do that, but for me, I can get on that scale and be mindful of the fact that that number is just a number. It's just for information. And now I'm seeing patterns over when I'm at the beginning of my cycle, middle, end, and how my weight fluctuates. And that's completely normal. So if you jump on the scales on a Monday and then you jump on a Friday, and then, you're kind of moving from those first 2 weeks into the second 2 weeks, chances are the scales are going to go up. That is just because that's what's going on in your body. So try not to be too hard on yourself, comparing yourself in a 2-week period. You want to kind of look at it more from like a bird's eye view, looking down for what's going on, I guess. So yeah, think about slightly upping your calories in those second 2 weeks if you're finding that you're hungry. Remember your water first. Is it hunger? Sometimes it possibly is. So is it true hunger, or is it that it's some kind of habit? So for me today, I wasn't hungry, but I was definitely craving all the crap that was in the office because it was stress. So sometimes it's thinking about, well, where am I in my cycle, and just becoming a bit of a master of your own body and understanding a bit more about kind of where it is. So definitely I would highly recommend tracking where you are in your cycle, in your program, because what that also does is that helps you to stay realistic and stay motivated and not be demoralized. So definitely, if I look at my tracker when I was doing lift 4 and I can now see, okay, so that 3rd week and 4th week where I was just before I was coming on my period, I was nowhere near as strong, and I felt a little bit deflated because I hadn't lifted as much the previous week. We just have to be mindful of what's going on. There's nothing to say that you don't have to continue with that program, because actually you're still going to be getting a lot out of it. But what it means is it means that you're not going to be so hard on yourself, and you're going to understand those numbers a little bit more. Now, honestly, my voice, this is getting worse instead of better. Just a note on PCOS, because I know there are a few ladies that are a part of our group. Now, one thing is that no 2 cases of PCOS are the same. Some people have cycles that are very short. Some people have non-existent cycles, but the majority of people with PCOS, their cycles are about 34 days. Mine personally are about 38 at the moment. I think they're still trying to work themselves out after having Lila. One of the things that I have seen recommended quite often is to have some form of carbohydrates before and after your workout. Now, the reason why we do that is because often I was talking about the basal metabolic rate. Now, often with people that have PCOS, their basal metabolic rate is lower than most people. So having that like extra bit of carbs before and after, in mainly, like, probably the best thing to have is fruit. It's going to make sure that that's raised a little bit to give us the energy that we need. Same said, if you don't have PCOS and you are at that second part of your cycle, having a piece of fruit after your workout is a great way to control the leptin levels, to control those hunger pangs, and still have sustained energy throughout the rest of the day. So that's another reason why I do my workouts in the morning. I can have my Shakeology, I can have my fruit, I can have that for breakfast, and it then gives me the energy that I need to go through to lunch. So that's one thing. The other thing with PCOS is that we tend to be stronger, because we have our testosterone levels are higher than most women. Now, again, we're not going to get bulky, but people that have PCOS, that's why they're often better with lifting weights, and that's why those types of programs suit them. The other thing that we recommend is having slightly higher protein. So you just really got to work out what's right for your body in terms of portion size and how you're fueling it. Now, one of the things that I wanted to touch on is about having babies and what happens after having babies. First of all, as you probably know, I'm on a bit of a mission to prove that you can have some kind of fitness and some kind of body post-baby. But technically what we are doing is we are fighting evolution. Like our body has had a baby, so it realizes that it can have a baby. So now our bodies go, okay, well, we're going to continue to prep to have another baby, because that's just how we are made. The thing with having babies is that, we have the baby belly, we have the mummy tummy, some people have had C-sections, so it's not physically possible for our stomachs to go back the way they were, and there's scar tissue there potentially if you've had a C-section, and it can be quite deflating. And I think something that we're often shown of in the media is, there's these picture perfect women with their flat stomachs and all of this sort of stuff, but they're often people that haven't had babies, or they have, they've got a lot of money to be able to do whatever, but it's just, 99% of women, they are not physically able to get back to what their bodies were doing before, because we've stretched our stomachs, the skin isn't going to necessarily go back. And I guess I'm learning to embrace that. I have got all this skin. I know it's not going to go away, but I'm okay with that. I'm happy with what my body has been able to do for me and what it's been able to achieve. And although while sometimes we can feel a bit deflated, especially when we see women that have got, really flat stomachs and, loose skin and all the rest of it, for every person of us that's sitting here saying, gosh, I wish I looked like that, or I wish I had a more toned, we've got that little paunch below our belly buttons that it's just the skin. It's not going to disappear unless you cut it off, right? But I guess the way that I've been trying to think about it is that for every person, like us, that's sat here thinking like that, there's other people out there that really wish that they could be us, that wish that they had babies, that wish that, they could be mothers and all of the rest of it. So I'm kind of, learning to love my body in that sense, and what it's done for me and what it can do after having a baby, as opposed to trying to be something that, isn't physically possible now. Great if you can get back in that shape, but, we've got to learn to embrace and love what we've got and celebrate what our bodies have achieved. Because I think that's quite important. I think that's quite, because someone did say to me, I wish I could have kids. I don't care what I look like. I just wish that I could have kids, even though I look amazing. So that sat with me quite deep. And I was like, yeah, no, I get that. that's all I wanted to say, really. I don't know if that helps at all. And hi, Ash. Nice to see you, babe. Was it helpful in terms of menstruation, understanding more about our bodies, not beating ourselves up about it? What are your thoughts? How are you going to stop giving yourself a hard time? I'm going to unmute you all.
So I'm on the other side, Hannah.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, because I have had hysterectomy now. So I started getting hot flushes and going through the menopause. And so my estrogen is up and down. And that is also what I've noticed is my weight gain now is tending to stick to my stomach and the top of my thighs. So what I found really helping is the weight training and the resistance training. And the cardio, it really seems to just be shifting it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, isn't it? It's sort of like, no, I think us becoming experts in our own bodies is so important, but really understanding like what these hormones do to our bodies and why, you know, everyone often goes like, oh, I've got this bit of fat here I want to get rid of, or why won't this little bit shift? Well, often when we then start to get leaner, our bodies are holding on to fat because it's like, no, don't go, don't disappear, because that's how we're made. And you know, estrogen levels and proestrogen, and I'm definitely trying to learn more about them so I can share it with you all, because it kind of goes, it's so deep, and the mechanics and the science behind it is really, really, really interesting. I'm trying to kind of do it in a condensed, making sense kind of way. But yeah, I think we've just got to not give ourselves too much of a hard time for our bodies storing that extra bit of fat, or the scales going up, or feeling more hungry. You know, got to be in tune with our bodies, right?
Yeah.
See, for me now, I'm on medication, and there's one tablet that stops me having a period. So I'm on the pill, and I know when I'm going to have the period.
Yeah.
But sometimes I might only bleed one day, sometimes I don't at all. You know?
Yeah. So yeah, with contraceptives, and now I don't know enough about this, but with contraceptives, your body is still going, the contraceptives are still pushing you through that cycle.
Yeah.
So even just tracking, so I've got an app called Glow, and I track when I have my periods, just so one, because I want to know because of my PCOS, but it's also really helping me with this. Now, I was still tracking them when I was on the pill and that sort of stuff as well, because you can still, it's, you know, your body is still getting ready to be in that state. So knowing where you are and understanding. So for example, it might be helpful for you to know, Colleen, those 2 weeks before, and, you know, I know your meds make you hungry as well, but that might, you know, knowing that, okay, well, I'm due to have my period next week. That's another reason why I'm feeling a bit more hungry.
Yeah.
Just so, you know, it's just about learning. We don't necessarily have to act on it, or we might want to act on it and increase our food a little bit. You know, it's a bit like that.
Yeah.
That helps. We've got 3 minutes before we have to disappear. Has anyone got any thoughts, or like, have you noticed what your cycle does? You notice what happens at different parts of the month? You can all start getting curious now, I promise you.
Yeah. So I know. Oh, God, sorry. God, no, go.
No, on you go. You're fine. You go.
I was just going to say, I still have that whole cycle as well going on. It's just it's less than it was. So I don't get periods. So I'm just yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Go away.
Yeah.
Go on, Ash.
Ashley.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just sort of going back into a routine again, and I've noticed that now that I've got mine back, that today I haven't fitted it in, but I haven't felt the same motivation, the same energy. Everything's just. I didn't even consider to think that was the real reason for it. I was just a bit like, oh, failed today, but it's fine. I'll crack on tomorrow. But probably a wee bit to do with my lack of energy and enthusiasm and a bit of a slump because I'm in a bad mood kind of day. Here's a mess, everything. It's like sticking out everywhere. It's ridiculous.
Well, look, look. This is the hormones as well.
It looks great.
No, it's brilliant, isn't it? At least mine's now not quite as tufty as it was when it was like this short. I was like, my hair, what's going on? It's all
I keep down. It's really bad.
Anyway, it was lovely to talk to you, ladies. This is gonna time us out, but thank you so much for joining. If you've got any questions or want to know any more about this, then drop me a message and we can have more of a chat, or I can share a bit more. And I've recorded it, so I'll make sure that it goes up for everyone else to see. But very quickly, give me a little smile. Smile. Lovely to see you all. Have a lovely rest of your evenings, and I'll see you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.